If you're drowning in debt, credit cards, student loans, car loans and mortgages, you're most definitely not alone. But in this video, I'm going to show you how you can pay off thousands off your debt faster than you ever thought was possible, so you can get out of debt in 2025. And with that, let's build you a path from debt to freedom as quickly as we possibly can. Debt doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad with money, but sometimes it means that you weren't taught the system how to use debt to your advantage and how best to pay it off in the most effective manner. And what can happen is that can then spiral. So you've got car loans, you then add a mortgage to that, you then need to have unexpected bills, which means you then need to take out further loans to be able to pay for those. But by the end of this video, you should be having a clear step-by-step instruction and plan on how to implement your way to freedom. So a few of the sections we're going to be going over today include mindset, assessment of the debt, methods of the debt, automation, and long-term habits. The first section of this is mindset, and what's really important to understand is that debt will go away, but often what you find is that it's your mind that keeps it present and makes you keep thinking that over the long term that it'll be with you for a long time. And when we think about mindset, we should be talking about debt more often. We should be discussing it with the people that we love. We should be discussing it with the lenders and the providers. And we should be discussing it with ourselves as well in terms of understanding the debt. You shouldn't be focusing on shame and guilt, but we should be focusing on strategy and how to avoid debt long term. And you need to understand your reasons why. Why do you want to pay off the debt? Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's a goal, maybe you want to earn more money in the long term. So it's thinking about having a goal and understanding in your mind, why do you want to pay off this debt and how are you going to do it in order to be able to shift your perspective of what your debt means for you. I would also try and visualize life without debt. So think about the future. Think about once you've paid this debt off, how is it going to make you feel? How is it going to give you more freedom with your money? And how will you avoid getting into further debt in the future based on the experiences that you're feeling today? Because the way you need to think about it is that being debt-free is almost like a mission, it's a goal. It's not going to happen overnight, but it needs to take mindset change so you can actually understand and think about it in a different way. Because otherwise, you're just going to spiral and keep getting further into debt because you don't understand it properly. So part two of this is going to be looking at facing the numbers. You can't fix what you don't know. So it's really important that you understand how much debt you're in. You need to understand what the interest rates are, what the minimum payments are, and when you're expected to pay this debt off by. If you've got more than one form of debt, so it's not just one credit card loan, you need to be splitting this out by each individual loan that you've got. So you actually understand which ones are most expensive and which ones have you got the most debt on. There are so many spreadsheets out there online that will be able to do this for you and help you formulate this, or you can just do this yourself. You can create a simple spreadsheet with a few columns in terms of who the debt's with, how much is left on the debt, when it expires, what the interest rate is, and what the minimum payments are on that debt. It's obvious that when you're writing this down, you're going to feel fear, you're going to feel like you're going to be out of control, but it's really important that you do this and you understand what the numbers are, because this is the first step to understanding how you're going to be able to become debt-free in the future. And it's important to understand that awareness creates control. Being aware of the debt that you've got makes you put you back in control of the debt so you can actually do something about it. If the debt's continually building, you don't actually know how much you've got, how can you ever be in control of paying it off? So you need to make sure that you're picking a strategy that works for you. There's no one size fits all, and there's no one strategy that works for everyone, because people have different levels of debt, people have different numbers of debt, different interest rates and different payments. It's really important that based on your circumstances, you find a way that works for you. So there's a couple of ways you can look at this, which is, I'm going to focus on two. One is debt snowball, and this is where you look at your little ones first. So you've ordered your payments of debt, you've looked at the highest and the lowest balances, and you look to pay off the smallest ones first. Now, one of the reasons you might do this is in order to get the small wins. If you've got £20 in debt on one and you've got £150 on debt on another credit card, paying off the £20 credit card will mean you've reduced your debt from two separate loans into one separate loan. So by doing that, you get quick wins and you feel a bit more motivated in terms of your debt journey. So it could be a really good way to get started. It will also feel like you're getting somewhere, give you a bit of momentum, and it's a really good way to get started. Debt avalanche is where you look at the top down. So in this circumstances, once you've written out all of your debt balances and the interest rate, you look at the one that's accumulating the highest level of interest. Because even though it could be with the smallest balance, it's really important that you pay off the high interest rate debt first, because for every £1, it's accumulating more interest than what your other balances will be. And mathematically, this will be the fastest way to pay off your debt. Factually, by paying off the highest interest rate debt first, you will clear your debt the fastest. But you should choose the method whichever keeps you consistent. So whatever's going to keep you going for the longest term and whatever's going to keep you most motivated, that's what you should go for. Paying off the debt is clearly the key. So paying off any debt is better than nothing. But whether you want to pay off the smallest balances first or you want to pay off the high interest rate first, I would always tend to go for the highest interest rate first because systematically it's the fastest. But that might not necessarily work for you in terms of how it makes you feel. You need to be thinking about budgeting and choosing a system that works for you. It's great paying off debt, but if you're accumulating more debt than you're paying off, actually your balances are getting bigger and your debt's moving further away from you. So it's really important that you've got those budgets and those plans in place in order to avoid that from happening. So what I'd really look at doing is tracking every expense that goes out of your bank for the next 30 days. You can even look at historic back statements to look at how much you're spending in previous months. That will then help you to identify ways that you could perhaps cut out savings. So it might be Netflix subscriptions, it might be subscriptions to things such as Spotify and whatever else that you've got going on, like the daily coffee that you may buy. And think about ways that you can perhaps reduce that savings, and can you put that excess that you would be spending on those subscriptions that are perhaps unnecessary and move that into paying off your debt. Remember, a debt journey is hard and you're going to have to cut things out of your life that you want to spend on, but you've got to think about the long-term benefits and how you're going to feel once you've paid off that debt and you can resume and go back to normal. You could temporarily apply the 70-20-10 rule, which is that 70% go on your needs, 20% go on your wants, and 10% go on your savings and paying off your debt. But I would only do that in the short term, and what I would actually move towards is more of a 50-30-20 rule, which is where 50% go on your needs, 30% goes on your wants, and then you have 20% going towards your savings. And that's really important because you've got a bigger proportion going towards your saving and paying off your debt. So it's identifying all of your fixed and mandatory costs. Hopefully that's under 50% of the earnings that you're making in the month. And then you can split out 30% towards your wants and 20% towards savings. And we've already been through reducing some of your recurring spend. And it's really important to understand that every single pound that you save can go towards paying off your debt, which takes you one step closer than where you were yesterday. And try and automate some of your payments as well. So it's really important that when the money comes into your bank, create standing orders so that you're automatically paying off some of your debt without having to think about it. If you've then got extra money that you've identified from saving throughout the month, or you've got excess at the end of the month, you can then make additional payments to pay off that higher level of interest debt. But initially, you should be making sure that you're transferring a set amount every single month. It's mandatory, and that's always taking you one step closer to your goal without you having to think about it. If your debt is continuing to grow and you're not able to meet the payments to be able to sustain that reducing of the debt, I would start to think about ways that you can increase your income, because the additional income can then be used to pay off that debt. So it might be things such as selling things on Etsy, selling things on eBay. Have you got any old items that you could also sell off? And then you could also be thinking about asking your boss for a pay rise. Could you move jobs that would offer you a higher level of salary? And there could be things such as side hustles, such as creating YouTube videos, for example. And what you should be doing is 100% of that additional cash that you're getting in, you should be investing directly into paying off your debt. Because although you're getting more income, you might be inclined to spend that money on things to enjoy your life, which is great. But remember, you're on a debt journey and it's going to be hard. So you should be making sure that any additional income that you're getting through side hustles and freelance work, that is going directly into paying off your debt. And another real useful way you might be able to do is, if you've got multiple levels of debt, some with high, some with low interest, try and consolidate your debt. Often you'll find there are banks that will do 0% loan transfer, so you can transfer your loan from one bank into another, you can consolidate them together, and by doing that you don't pay any additional interest for normally 1 or 2 years. So it's a really great way that if you'll be able to put additional income over the next couple of years, transfer your high interest debt to a low interest debt bank and then pay that off as quickly as you possibly can, and that will make sure that you're reducing the level of interest that you're having to pay over the term. And remember to track your progress. Small wins will keep you emotionally invested in the project and to be able to continue paying off your debt journey. And it might be that you want to create a YouTube series or a TikTok series showing your debt journey, paying off your debt, and that will help you to be held accountable for what you're trying to achieve. You may have a visual spreadsheet tracker, so it might have a spreadsheet of all your debts that we've already discussed, and then you might have the minimum repayments that you're going to be making every single month, any additional income that's going in, And then by visually being able to see how much your debt is, how much you're coming down each month, that should also help you to be motivated, because you might be able to see that if you keep up those payments within the next 6 months, you may be able to halve your debt depending on the value of debt that you've got. You should also celebrate milestones as well. For example, you might go out for a nice meal or treat yourself to something nice after so many months of being able to keep up your debt repayments. So another real good way to keep you on track and keep you motivated in terms of paying off this debt as quickly as you can. I would, however, avoid new debt. So it's really important that whilst you've got existing debt, or you may have multiple levels of existing debt, that you don't take any new debt on. And that's really key here, because you don't want to make your debt situation worse by paying off one and taking out more debt on another. Maybe that you need to freeze bank cards. You may need to let banks know that if you're requesting to take out debt, you don't want to take any, so you might be able to block yourself from taking out new debt. Think of ways that can stop you from taking out new levels of debt. And finally, once you've reached your goal, which is a huge milestone, you want to protect your freedom. So think about ways it's going to stop you from getting back into debt in the future. Using the additional funds that you were paying off your debt to build an emergency fund. So you've then got cash available should you have any unexpected bills. So that you've now paid off your debt and you're now building a 3 to 6 month emergency fund over time, which will give you that financial stability and freedom. Learn how to use credit cards smartly, not spending more than you can afford and only spending on credit cards where you're able to pay off and clear those balances in full every single month. Or perhaps you might not use credit cards at all and you might just want to use debit cards because of the previous history. Keep tracking your monthly expenses. It's really important that whilst you've already tracked your monthly expenses and you're thinking about how you can save additional income to pay off your debt, continue to do that. Is there anywhere else that you can save money? And you can then put that into a savings pot, which hopefully you can then invest in the long term. Keep educating yourself on levels of personal finance. There are so many videos out there on YouTube. There's also books and blogs that you can read in terms of educating yourself on personal finance, and that will help you to avoid getting into these situations again. And finally, as I've just discussed, make sure that you're replacing your debt repayments and putting that into a separate pot to be able to invest for your future. So what I would say is really make sure that you're investing for yourself in terms of paying off your debt, and then investing for your future in terms of putting that into the stock market to make that grow and work for you.